Wow. The tabernacle and the temple, the description of the tabernacle is pretty explicit, and I think that we can pretty well guess what it looked like. When it comes to the offerings, what you're calling sacrifices, I'm going to call them offerings, because I think what Jesus did was a sacrifice. I think what the Israelites were doing were making offerings to God. Amen. Okay, there's a difference. Jesus gave up something so that you could have something better. What the Israelites were doing were bringing something as kind of a gift to God. Sometimes it was a gift because they had gotten away from God and they had to get back close to God. They had to become at one with God, put at one together, get atone. They had to atone for a sin, or they had to atone for a transgression. So sometimes they brought this gift to God to get back close to God. Sometimes they brought a gift to God because they felt so full of thanks and they wanted to make an offering of thanks to God, or they felt so full of happiness that they brought a wholeness offering. So there's a different word. And the word for offering is korban, which means to get close. It's from the root to be close. So just to bring the terminology again, I'm a stickler for words. I understand that I was trained as a student of words. I'm not a historian. I'm what's known as a philologist, somebody who studies words. Sometimes I used to study ancient languages that predated the Bible. I studied Akkadian and Ugaritic and Sumerian, and I used to jokingly say I was a necrophilologist. I used to study dead words. But then some of the junior college students came and I told them I was a necrophilologist, and they said, with all these little children around? So I said I better not use that as a joke. Anyway, so I study words. So I'm very careful about words. But when I read the book of Leviticus about the offerings, I notice that the Torah doesn't give us all the details on how to do the offerings. It seems to leave out a detail here or there. It seems as if there's always something that if I really wanted to try to do this, I'd have to stop here and say, what comes next? There's a step missing here or a step missing here. It seems to me that at one point, the Levites might have been in charge of the offerings. And then, by the time the Torah is written, now the Kohanim, the priests, are in charge of the offerings. It says, for all the offerings, he should bring the offering. And then it says the Kohen does this. Well, who's the he? It's not really clear who the he is. So it's almost as if the Torah doesn't want you to start the offerings. If the time comes when the offerings are going to be brought back again, and I hope not, but if God decides that we're going to start bringing animals to the temple again, and if God does, you want to bring mine? Because I'm not going to do it. But that God will have to give the rules again to the priests. I don't think we can figure them out. That's my feeling. That's the answer, the best that I can do to answer your question.
Kind of along the same lines, what is the overall, as far as from the Reformed to the Ultra-Orthodox, what's the kind of general consensus of ever building a third temple? I know that there's people in Israel that have artifacts made and they've already got some of the furniture, but I mean politically it's kind of crazy. But what is the real possibility as far as feelings towards that?
Well, it depends on where you think the third temple has to be.
Oh, yeah.
Some people think that the third temple has to be where the Dome of the Rock is. So, I mean, we can build the third temple because it can be right after World War III. But lately, archaeologists have decided that the temple was actually about 200 meters north of where the Dome of the Rock is. Do you all know what the Dome of the Rock is?
Yes.
The Dome of the Rock is the Muslim holiest place, the third holiest place in the Muslim world. It's a beautiful place. I've been inside. It's absolutely breathtakingly beautiful from the outside, from the inside. It's an octagonal big building with a golden dome, literally covered with gold. On the inside, beautiful calligraphy and what do you call it? Geometric patterns, because they really take the Ten Commandments seriously, where it says, you shall make no image of that which is in the heavens above, or the earth below, or the sea which is below the earth. So they make no images, no paintings, no pictures, no anything of anything that you would see in the heavens, the earth, or the sea. So they only use geometric patterns or calligraphy for their art, but it's very beautiful. And the carpeting is beautiful, and there's a rock there where they believe that Muhammad ascended to paradise, to heaven, and where he received the 5 pillars of Islam. 5 pillars, sound familiar? Like the 5 books of Moses. Yeah. It was originally a Sinai story and then got moved to Jerusalem. Whatever the case may be, now Israeli scholars are beginning to say that the Temple of Solomon and the Temple of Herod, or the Second Temple, were about 200 meters north of where the Dome of the Rock is. I like to call that political archaeology, but whatever the case may be, we'll know when the Messiah has come, when the Muslims allow the Jews to build the temple right there next to the Dome of the Rock, and Jesus will come and inaugurate the two of them together, and we'll have, the Messianic age will begin, and the perfect world, the kingdom of God will have begun, and everything will be perfect. So, if they ever allow it to be built, you'll know that the Messiah is coming. Yeah. That's the way I'm being a little sarcastic. Some of my Orthodox friends, very, very Orthodox friends, think it's going to happen. I personally don't think it's going to happen. I don't think there's any need for it. When the temple was destroyed, prayer took the place of offerings. The study took the place of the inherited priesthood. That is, the rabbis took the place of the inherited priesthood. And Christianity took its development because the temple was destroyed. If the temple had not been destroyed, Judaism would not be what it is today, and Christianity might not be what it is today. So I don't think there's a need for a temple. But some Orthodox Jews are planning, and they're ready. So if it happens, the Muslims are ready not to let them happen. So what can I tell you? Yes, sir.
Is the Wailing Wall, is that the stones from the temple, the remaining stones?
They're from the Wailing, we call it the Western Wall. It was the Christians actually named it the Wailing Wall, because when they saw Jews praying, sometimes you watch an Orthodox Jew and they're praying, so it sounded like they were crying. So they called it the crying wall, the Wailing Wall. It's the western wall of the Temple Mount, which Herod built in order to make the Temple Mount more spectacular. Herod the Great, not Herod from the time of Jesus, but Herod from the time of Jesus' birth, wanted to make the temple the most spectacular place on earth. And the priest said, "You're not touching that temple. What, are you out of your mind? Get away from there. That's a religious place." So he said, "I'll tell you what, we'll compromise. I'll take the area around the temple, and I'll make the plaza really spectacular." And he did. And that was a compromise. And what he did was he took this little tiny mountain that came up like this with the temple on the top, and he made the mountain bigger. Believe it or not, he made the mountain bigger. And he made the top of the mountain bigger. And what's left is this western wall that made the mountain bigger is what's left. And some of the stones that he used are between 10 and 100 times bigger than any of the stones they used to build the pyramids. Okay? They are hundreds of thousands of tons in weight. How they got them there, nobody really knows. There are theories, but nobody knows for a fact. I think the best theory, they couldn't put them on rollers of any form, because they all would have crushed under the weight. So I think the best theory is what they did was they carved them as rollers, rolled them into place, chopped off the edge, let it flop into place, and chopped off 3 more sides, and made it into a block. And can you imagine how much they wasted in order to make a 100,000-ton block? It's an amazing building project. So that's what Herod did. And then after Herod, those are the bottom stones. And then the wall was rebuilt several times. Saladin the Great, one of the Muslim conquerors, rebuilt it. And then, again, another time in more modern times. So that's what the Western Wall is today. little bit out of my field, but I happen to know a little bit of.
Is there anything you want to say about the Passion or anything like that?
The movie The Passion, I think, I understand it's, it's not your tradition, and some of you may not be movie-going people, and that's quite all right with me. Mel Gibson made a movie because he had a personal need to express his religious faith. And this movie will be a very moving movie for religious Christians. For religious Jews, it's going to be a scary movie because Mel Gibson didn't quite understand the difference between Judeans and Jews, and the Jews, and so he portrays the Judeans as Jews, and we have the quote in Matthew 27:25 or 25:27, where it says, "His blood be upon us and our children too," where I think that quote was the Judeans saying, "We accept this Galilean Messiah and his blood of atonement upon us." That is, they accepted him as a blood sacrifice and not as a guilt that we did something terrible and we should be punished for it. Mel Gibson has these characters leering and looking guilty for doing some terrible crime. I think, religious Christians will go to the movie and not even see that happening, because they're going to see this. They're going to focus on Jesus and the great gift of suffering that he's offering. But the Jewish people aren't going to be looking at Jesus because he's not part of our tradition. We're going to be looking at the Romans and the Jews and seeing how they're portrayed and being frightened, because in the last 1,000 years, passion plays, especially in Europe, have brought much suffering and even death to Jewish communities. And I don't think it's going to happen here. I'm not worried about it happening in the Bay Area, certainly. I'm not worried about it happening in the United States of America. It's not going to happen here. I do worry about it happening in Europe. I can't imagine if it should ever play in Europe. In Syria, I can imagine terrible consequences to the Jewish community in Syria. But whatever the case may be, I would say, if you go to see the movie, it's going to be a religious experience, and I praise God that it should be meaningful to you, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be meaningful to you. If you have Jewish friends and they're upset, just try to reassure them that it's meaningful to you, and that that you didn't see it as some horrible thing that the Jewish people did to Jesus, and then maybe they'll understand. So again, I thank you for taking your time with me, and I really appreciate it, the opportunity to be with you today.